After 8 years of one-party rule, Kansas government is once again divided. A Democrat in the governor's office and a legislature dominated by Republicans. How will they get along, and what will they accomplish to make Kansas a better place to live and work? As the 2019 legislative session gets underway, we'll have the full story from Topeka starting right now on Kansas Week. Hello and welcome to Kansas Week. I'm Jim Grayway in for Pilar Pedraza, who has spent this week at the state capitol. A new governor has been sworn in and is talking about the changes she wants to make. Meanwhile, the legislature is ready to start work. Pilar joins us now by Skype from Topeka. Pilar, there's a lot to talk about. Take it away.
Well, Jim, it's certainly been a very busy week throughout this entire week. It's kept Dion and Lefler from the Eagle and I running all over the State House, which, by the way, is a very big building. Our step count is through the roof, to say the least. But this week has been all about change. And one change was very evident. That's what we started the week off with. And that was a brand new governor. And she had one message that she wanted to share with the people in her inaugural address. Here's a piece that I filed with Cake News earlier this week.
We must work together in the spirit of putting the collective good ahead of any individual ambition or agenda.
Laura Kelly campaigned on a promise of reaching across the aisle to find the best way for Kansas, regardless of political parties.
We must do more to lift up those Kansans who serve and encourage more to join their ranks.
On her inauguration day, she urged Kansans to be part of that unity by helping make their own communities better through service.
There are lots of ways to serve, and today I ask all Kansans to find new ways to give back, to do a little more to make your community a better place to live.
That promise of nonpartisanship threaded throughout her inaugural address, but so did many of her political priorities that could lead to confrontations with Kansas Republicans, who may agree on the goals but often disagree with how to get there. Kelly promised Kansans to work hard on finding that middle ground.
It will be my guiding principle as your governor. Yeah, that's what Kansans expect of us, and they have every right to demand it of us.
And trying to tie her plans for change to the progressive history of Kansas was threaded throughout that inaugural service, from a gospel choir singing old Negro spirituals to the drum line from Topeka High School presenting a couple of rousing numbers that really got people rocking. But it was the speech itself and that message of bipartisanship that really has kind of threaded throughout Laura Kelly's campaign, and now has really been the push that is necessary, Dion, as we move into the legislative session.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're going to accomplish anything up here this year without having, significant elements of both parties on board. It's really interesting to, to come to these inaugurations and see a party change. This is the third time I've, been through that, and it really does. You just see these like shifting of alliances, and these, people who used to be for things are now against them, and people who used to be against things are now for them, and it's a little bit disorienting, really. But yeah, I mean, bipartisan is sort of the watchword here, and I think both parties may be thinking that might be their key to success 2 years, 4 years down the line. So, maybe they'll get something accomplished.
Although, as we do move forward later in the show, we're going to talk a little bit about the budget rollout this week. And there was something of a lack of bipartisanship amongst Republican leadership as they saw that budget coming out.
Oh, yeah. And, you'll see that. But like what I was talking about with the, shifting alliances. Well, one of the things the Republicans are criticizing the governor for is trying to slow down payments to the public employee retirement system. Well, I've sat in this building and watched Republicans take money out of the CAPER system time after time after time, and so now it's like for the Republicans that's like sort of sacred now, and the Democrats are like, well, it's not that big a deal. So it really is, there's this little role reversal thing going on here, but I think that's just politics. And I think as we move through the session, particularly when we get toward the end of this session, I think we're going to see, kind of a sort of back to the middle kind of a development here.
Well, in talking about the disorientation of this switch, a couple of things we've noticed. I believe it was Stephen Corando with KCUR tweeted out a picture of Laura Kelly at her first event on Tuesday, and she's holding the mic, which is something that neither Brownback nor Collier did. But she was very adamant about it at that event. No, I'm not using the stand. I'm going to hold the mic. And it's just, there's been a lot of those little things throughout the week that you don't realize, you don't think about until suddenly, left is right and right is left and things aren't where you were expecting them to be. And yeah, so disorientation is exactly what I would call it this week.
Yeah, but it's fun. It's exciting, and it shakes things up. And, frankly, the state has been in need of shaking up for a while because we had pretty crystallized positions going on, among really both sides, and especially among the Republicans. So it's kind of it's kind of refreshing to see people come up here and, maybe look at things in a new way, and, whether it'll play out that way or not, I can't tell you. But, I've seen, I think, a little more camaraderie than I have in some previous sessions. I think I've seen maybe a little bit more willingness to talk to each other. Obviously, there's still people on both sides who are, adamant about their position, and their position is their position, and they're going to keep that position forever. But, you always see that in a legislative body because some districts are like that. Mm. So you just, you can't run in that district and be the guy who compromises with the other side. Yeah. So it's but I think what I'm seeing is a recognition that we have had problems, and those problems need some work. Yeah. And I'm seeing that from both sides. Now, yes, the Republicans may think the solution is this, and the Democrats may think the solution is that, and the solution may be something that's somewhere between the poles, but it feels a little bit more friendly here, I guess.
That is definitely for sure. I've definitely seen that. One thing that really kind of struck me is after the State of the State address is Governor Kelly was walking back to her office. One of the State House workers, not a lawmaker, not an elected politician, but just one of the workers who's here 24/7, 365 days a year, or at least feels like it.
Yeah.
Obviously.
24/7, unless they're federal employees.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole nother story. But she's calling out from the fourth floor, Laura, and waving at her, and Laura waved back. And that's just a much lighter, friendlier atmosphere than we have seen here in recent years. Yeah. But whether or not that carries through as we move into the session, well, we'll have to wait and see, because the legislative session did start the same day that Laura Kelly was inaugurated on Monday. Tiffany Lane from KSN takes a look at how it went.
As you can imagine, it's been a busy day here at the Capitol. We began with the swearing in of new Governor Laura Kelly, and then just a few hours later, lawmakers got busy to work in the first day of the legislative session.
By accepting the oath of office, the people of Kansas confer on their governor significant duties and responsibilities.
Governor Kelly gave a few words before taking her official oath Monday, talking about her path to her new role and her hopes for the people of Kansas.
We want the same basic things. We want to know that our hard work will be respected, not just with a pat on the back, but a fair and livable wage and a chance to grow.
After the ceremony, lawmakers got busy to work as the gavel dropped for the first day of session. The big issue at hand, public school finance. Lawmakers must take action this session to provide millions more in funding to respond to the Kansas Supreme Court's ruling.
We are very close to getting that done. And with just a little bit more effort, we can get there. And I hope that's what our focus is, not on constitutional amendments or redrafting a formula that's already been certified and approved.
I asked lawmakers if taxes need to be raised or if the other departments need to be cut to meet the court's mandate.
We agree with Governor, now, I'll say Governor-elect, but now Governor Kelly, that we're not going to raise taxes. But we do have to balance the entire budget. And especially looking the out years, we need to make sure that this is a stable budget.
Another focus for Governor Kelly, Medicaid expansion.
knowing leadership on both sides, I think it's going to be a tough task for her to get anything through. As far as these combination plans, I've not seen any yet, so I don't know what those look like.
There is a consensus pretty much in regards to Medicaid expansion. I think that it will pass if it comes up, but then again, anything can happen, in terms of what will take place on the floor. But I'm very confident that it will pass.
Now lawmakers go to the drawing board as they head into the second day of the legislative session Tuesday. Now, speaking with lawmakers, some of the other issues they said are of importance to them, one of which is President Trump's tax cuts. They want to get those in the hands of Kansans, as well as workforce development. Now, those Wichita lawmakers are saying they're referencing those new jobs created at Spirit Air Systems and how they need benefits of those. Here for you in Topeka, Tiffany Lane, KSN News 3.
Again, that was Tiffany Lane from KSN reporting. And once again, bipartisanship, one of the big watchwords as lawmakers are getting into this. Diane, you have sat through more of the committee meetings this week than I have. Obviously, not a whole lot on the schedule just yet. But as you're watching the lawmakers deal with each other, is that kind of following through on what they're saying when we talk to them?
Well, I think what I've seen is yes. I spent quite a bit of time watching the utilities committees, the House and Senate, as the Kansas Corporation Commission, the state utility regulators, the people who set your electric rates. They came in and they were explaining why our electric rates are higher than in surrounding states. Now, obviously, it's because we have a lot of coal-fired generation and some of the other states are using natural gas. But what I was seeing was, Democrats, Republicans, they were asking a lot of the same questions. So it was like, you could see that there was a desire really on both sides of that aisle to just, to try to come up with some kind of solution here on electric bills. And it was, I don't know, it had a different feel to me than a lot of committee meetings I've been to where everybody just kind of goes, well, okay, I'm on the side of the utility and he's on the side of the consumer advocates. And, so there was like, there just didn't seem to be that this time. And it was really an interesting dynamic in that committee right now.
Well, we'll have to wait and see how that plays out as we get through the rest of the session here, especially as they go through the budget debates later on down the road. But a few of the things that Laura Kelly wants to do, obviously, there's no way she's going to be able to get a Republican-dominated legislature to pass some of those items. And so day one, she jumped in and decided, you know what, this is something I promised folks would be taken care of. I have to do it in the executive office because it's not going to happen in the legislature right now. Tiffany Lane takes a look at that.
It was inside these doors today that Governor Kelly put the ink to paper in her first executive order. It's something she said she would be signing before she even came into office, and she says she's glad she was able to get it done right away.
Discrimination of any kind has no place in Kansas, and it will not be tolerated in this administration.
Tuesday, Governor Kelly reinstated a protection first put in place by former Governor Kathleen Sebelius in 2007. Governor Sam Brownback rescinded it in 2015.
I want our state employees to perform at the very, very highest level. I don't care, who they're married to, or the color of their skin.
We've seen nationally that these kinds of laws and administrative orders open the door for everyone. Because if you see a state treating a group of people right, they'll treat you right.
The first two openly LGBT members of the Kansas House, Brandon Woodard and Susan Ruiz, were there for the signing and say the order is an important step for the state.
I see it as Kansas being back in action. Many Kansans I don't think realize that you can be fired for being gay, denied housing for being who you are, denied business, and so this executive order says to them that they're welcome.
The order includes not only state employees, but is also extended to state contracts and subcontracts. I spoke with some groups who are cautious about the new rule. They say they want to take time to look at it to see the financial impact it could have on small businesses who have contracts with the state. But some lawmakers say protections for LGBT employees should be extended outside of state employment to areas like housing.
What we hear repeatedly is everybody saying, well, the state's never going to do this, so we want to do it in our cities. We want to pass these kind of ordinances. It's time. It's building up. It's time.
Now, Governor Kelly says if lawmakers put forward something with the same type of protections for private citizens outside of state government, she would be glad to sign it. In Topeka, Tiffany Lane, KSN News 3.
And again, we want to thank KSN for sharing those last two stories with us. Now, the executive order returning civil rights job protections to state LGBTQ workers are something that Laura Kelly had promised throughout the campaign. She carried through on that on day one, but she also indicated that she would support similar legislation expanding that to the rest of the state. What are the chances of that happening?
Honestly, I don't think the chances are all that great. I think it's one thing to say that, this is what's going to happen with state employees. I think it's another to try to get that through the legislature. It was an interesting day, though, because, the degree to which she's embracing that LGBTQ issue really kind of struck me. They had a rally down here in the Capitol about, it was a group called Kansas People's Agenda. And it's a very left-wing organization, coalition, I guess would be the better term. But she spoke there. She came there and she spoke to them and they cheered and, they had a great time. And I've never seen a Kansas governor speak to a rally like that in this building. I mean, they happen all the time, but I've never seen the governor actually go down there and talk to it. So it really was, that was really kind of a sea change. And, I think, the chances of expanding beyond what she can do through executive order is probably fairly slim.
But we probably can expect further executive orders on some issues that she thinks are important because of that Republican-Democrat divide here at the State House now.
Right. But the thing is the next time they elect a Republican, they'll just change it all back. We had, the LGBTQ protection, for example, that existed under Governor Sebelius and Governor Parkinson, I believe. Yeah. And then when it became Governor Brownback, it was like, okay, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So, there are no permanent victories here in the Capitol. It's like, you win for a while, and then the other side wins for a while. And, like I said, I can't think of anything where I would go, wow, they won that, and that is just, that is the way it's going to be from now on. So, I don't know. It's just, we struggle.
Talking about struggles, the big struggle this year, of course, is going to be getting the budget passed. There were a lot of concerns that Laura Kelly would present just a one-year budget, which really, honestly, was the norm up until about 8 years ago when Brownback made a change. So, and she did end up presenting a one-year budget, and there were a lot of concerns about how she decided to pay for her budget. Here's a piece that I filed with Cake News about the budget rollout.
Governor proposes and the legislature disposes.
Within minutes of hearing the governor's plans for next year's budget, lawmakers had a lot of questions.
We need to find out what the health care numbers, where those came from. Are they updated?
One of the biggest, why only a one-year budget? Under Sam Brownback, the state moved to a two-year budget format.
This is a new administration. There's new people going into the agencies just in the last day. We need time. We just didn't want to make recommendations without thoroughly thinking them through.
That has some lawmakers who've gotten used to the two-year system unsettled as they look at budget numbers.
I do feel like I'm driving 70 miles an hour and can only see one car length ahead.
Especially in figuring out the state's debt, which would increase if the state refinances its KPERS payments, saving millions now, but owing quite a bit more down the road. And then there's the state's roads. Lawmakers want to figure out the next 10-year plan this session and need to know if Kansas will continue to steal money from what some call the Bank of KDOT to pay for other non-transportation projects.
One of the biggest pieces in the bucket has to do with, are we going to quit taking money from transportation and using it for other things? And so at some point in time, we have to say stop.
She's brought us her proposal, and now we'll have a debate, and we'll try to figure out what the best course of action is to take.
And, of course, watching as
Well, here in the studio to react to this week's developments at the Capitol, I'm joined by Friends University political science professor Russell Fox and by KFDI Radio News reporter
George Lawson.
George Lawson. Thanks, George. I knew your name. Well, Dr. Fox,
yes.
How surprised would you have been a year ago if you'd known a year later, here in 2019, that we would be inaugurating a Democrat governor in Kansas?
I mean, it's a surprise, obviously, when you're in a Republican state where, across most of the state, registered Republicans outnumber registered Democrats by 2 to 1. Anytime you have a Democrat elected statewide, it's a bit of a surprise. I don't know if it was a whole lot more than a bit of a surprise, because you could take a look at Sam Brownback's polling numbers. You could take a look at the damage that his economic policies had done to the state's finances. It was known that this was going to be a difficult election for the Republicans to win. They were going to have to get out all of their people and prevent them from going over to the other side. Anytime a Democrat gets elected to the governor's mansion, it means that Republicans went over and voted for a Democrat. And certainly that's what happened to put Laura Kelly in place.
And George, how do you sense the new governor is being received by the Republicans in the legislature right now?
Well, Pilar and Dion were talking about bipartisanship, kind of a new sense of that. And just from reaction to State of the State, kind of lukewarm to chilly reception from the Republicans for some of the things the governor talked about, but applause for some other things. She touched on 4 major issues, of course: school funding and the child welfare issue, expanding Medicaid, and economic development for rural communities. And I think that child welfare in the rural communities probably will get the most bipartisanship. They'll probably be able to come to some agreement on those issues, but the school funding and the Medicaid issue especially will probably be a major concern, and that's probably where you'll see the most conflict.
I suspect that we will see the argument for expanding Medicaid to be very much tied up with the idea of rural health care, rural hospitals. I mean, you were pointing out that there's probably a little bit more willingness on the Republican side to work with Democratic policies when it comes to helping out rural Kansas. They're going to build on that, and they're not going to have to reinvent the wheel to do so, because most of the people that have been pushing for Medicaid expansion over the past several years have tended to push really hard the idea that it is rural health hospitals and rural health care providers that are suffering the most and would be helped out the most by Medicaid expansion. So I see those two being linked.
And Republican Senator Jerry Moran has been talking about that quite a bit.
Very true.
And really getting on that issue. He's expressed a lot of concern for rural hospitals and rural health care. So that could be a trigger for people in the state of Kansas to get moving forward.
But Dr. Fox, the governor is pretty insistent that she does not want to raise taxes. She said she's not prepared to cut taxes right now either, but she's proposing more spending for, obviously, public schools, for Medicaid, and for child services. How's she going to swing that?
Well, every politician will talk about how they don't want to raise taxes, and they'll try to find some other way to either avoid the issue or rename the issue. I haven't seen the details of Governor Kelly's plan. Very few people have seen all of the nitty-gritty details. Clearly, I think she is taking a look at the fact that because of changes in federal tax law, there is potentially unclaimed money that the state would be able to make use of. Obviously, a lot of Republicans are going to characterize that new, available funding as a windfall that needs to be returned to Kansas taxpayers. And so you're going to see a big fight about that. Probably she's also doing some accounting that takes into consideration potential savings from Medicaid expansion. But yeah, there's a lot of accounting tricks that are at work here. She's asking for some fairly expensive things, and that money has to come from somewhere.
So is this a tactic? She's asking for more than she actually expects to get?
Well, smart negotiators do that, don't they?
Right. Yep. And George, how much do you sense there's a mood for compromise in not just at the legislature, but among constituents in general across the state?
There seems to be more of a mood for that perhaps this session than we've seen in the past, perhaps because of the 2018 elections and the issues that Russell has talked about. And perhaps there's more of an impetus for getting, and the governor also mentioned wanting to have a conservative budget. So that's something certainly that ties into what Republicans want. So they may be able to find some middle ground on some issues. Medicaid funding is probably going to be the biggest stumbling block. She's saying 14 million. Republicans think it's going to be more than that. So that's going to be the real discussion up there in Topeka. But it seems like there's more of a sense for working out bipartisan agreements in this session.
I mean, there's an interesting political shift going on in the state of Kansas, in the same way that you see a political shift taking place across the whole United States in both the Republican and the Democratic Party. People talk about it in terms of polarization. You can use whatever term you want. I don't think it's so much that the Republicans and the Democrats in the state of Kansas are further separate than they were before. They've always been fairly separate. The issue is that you're losing the people in between. There are fewer Republicans in Topeka who identify themselves as moderate Republicans, partly because Governor Brownback and the Republican Party tried to wipe those people out in primaries and replace them with conservatives while he was in power, and partly because a resurgent Democratic Party, especially up in northwestern Kansas, has taken out a lot of moderate Republicans.
So what will be the first indication to us of how this session is going to go? Whether there's going to be cooperation and compromise, or whether we're going to run into a lot of headbutting?
I think it's going to be seen in what Governor Kelly instructs legislative leaders to deal with first. If she puts first, if she puts in front Medicaid expansion, rural hospitals, that sort of thing, it might suggest that she wants to try to build on goodwill.
Right.
But if she puts like tax and budget issues first and foremost, the argument might be she knows there's going to be a fight, so let's just get into it right off the bat.
Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you, George Lassie. We appreciate you being here. And we thank you for watching. If you have a question or comment, email it to kansasweek@kpts.org. Have a great weekend and a great week ahead.